When orders change, the whole family moves, packing boxes, new schools, new routines. And when one person wants to pursue a degree, the whole family supports that journey too. At American Public University, we honor those sacrifices with flexible online undergraduate and master's programs at just $250 per credit hour. Wherever duty calls, APU helps military families make an impact and keep family first. Learn more at apu.apus.edu.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Tesla's fourth quarter 2025 Q&A webcast. My name is Travis Axelrod, Head of Investor Relations, and I'm joined today by Elon Musk, Vaibhav Taneja, and a number of other executives. Our Q4 results were announced at about 3 p.m. Central Time in the update deck we published at the same link as this webcast. During this call, we will discuss our business outlook and make forward-looking statements. These comments are based on our predictions and expectations as of today. Actual events or results could differ materially due to a number of risks and uncertainties, including those mentioned in our most recent filings with the SEC.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodie. I am your host, and on today's episode, we are going to cover Tesla's Q4 2025 earnings call. It's Q4 and the entire year. We're obviously going to get some news that Tesla is discontinuing the Model S and Model X, and we'll talk about that when we get to that part. But yeah. I don't really have anything to add to this because it's going to be a long episode anyway. So let's go ahead and jump into Elon's opening remarks, and he's going to talk about changing, not changing, let's say updating their messaging from sustainable abundance to amazing abundance. Amazing abundance. Do you want to know more about amazing abundance, folks? Because I don't think as many people know about it as they should. I'm just kidding. I think this is really dumb messaging, but let's listen to what Elon has to say on amazing abundance.
We've updated the Tesla mission to amazing abundance, and this is intended to send a message of optimism about the future. I think we're most likely headed to an exciting, amazing era of abundance, and I think with the advent or with the continued growth of AI and robotics, I think we actually are headed to a future of universal high income, not universal basic income, but universal high income. There's going to be a lot of change along the way, but that is what I see as the most likely outcome. So I think that it makes sense to update Tesla's mission to reflect that goal. And obviously along that way, we're going to keep improving safety, driving down the cost of goods, and getting people access to anything they need without compromise, and still making sure that the environment is great, nature is great, and people can have whatever they want, which seems like probably the best future. I'm open to other ideas, but that sounds like it sounds like if you could say what is the best future you could possibly imagine, I guess it would be that everyone can have whatever they want, including amazing medical care, but we still keep the beauty of nature and Earth. I think that's probably the best outcome, and we're seeing obviously the first steps along that way this year for Tesla, first major steps as we increase vehicle autonomy and begin to produce Optimus robots at scale. We're making very, very big investments. So this is going to be a very big CapEx year, as Vaibhav will get into. That is deliberate because we're making big investments for an epic future.
I am 100% in on that goal. However, I do think there are goals, and then there's just saying words. Tell me how you're going to achieve this goal. What is this step? And not just we're going to build a robot, because you don't know if the robot's going to work or not. We just don't. I want, like, here is a definitive plan. And to this point, and other people have asked for it, to this point, we don't have one. So that's what I would like to see. Because I want this to happen. I don't want anybody to be broke. I don't want anybody to be worrying about money, worrying about food, worried about bills. That sucks. I've had all of those things. And that's not a fun thing to worry about. It's stressful and it takes away from quality of life, in my opinion. However, I do need more than promises and platitudes in order for me to really get behind this. In theory, I want it. Tell me how you're going to do it. Tell me how you're going to get over all the regulatory hurdles to do this. Tell me how one company is going to spark this off, because one company cannot create sustainable abundance. This isn't Demolition Man and you're not Taco Bell. We have to have something that's a little bit more concrete in terms of planning. We can't say, well, robots are going to make everything and that will make everything super cheap and therefore you're going to be wealthy. Well, that doesn't work everywhere. That might work in some places, but it doesn't work everywhere. So you either update your mission to amazing abundance for some, which in that we already have that, or you give me a better roadmap of how we do this. And you know what? Give me a better roadmap, and if I see that it's something that I can get behind, I 100%. I'll throw my hat in there, and I'll do my best to help that occur. So I'll put my sweat equity in, so that people who are coming up behind me, because I'm 51, not too long, much longer for this world. I'd be happy to put in a little bit of sweat equity so that the people coming up behind me have it better. But I need to have a path, not just amazing abundance. I said it, so it's going to be there, or Elon said it, so it's going to be there. That I can't do that. That's not helpful. Let's keep on listening to Elon's opening remarks.
So I think all these investments make a lot of sense. We'll continue to make sure that when we do spend capital, it is spent very efficiently. But it's a lot of things. Major investments in batteries and the entire supply chain of batteries. So we're also going to be significant manufacturers of solar cells, and we're making massive investments in AI chips. So, but I think these all make a ton of strategic sense, and then I guess I have like one, I guess. It's not exactly bad news, but it's time to basically bring the Model S and X programs to an end with an honorable discharge, because we're really moving into a future that is based on autonomy, and so if you're interested in buying a Model S and X, now would be the time to order it. Because we expect to wind down S and X production in next quarter, and basically stop production of Model S and X next quarter. We'll obviously continue to support the Model S and X programs for as long as people have the vehicles, but we're going to take the Model S and X production space in our Fremont factory and convert that into an Optimus factory, which will, with the long-term goal of having 1 million units a year of Optimus robots in the current SX space in Fremont. So that is it's slightly sad, but it is time to bring the SX programs to an end and shift. Really, it's part of our overall shift to an autonomous future. As my profile picture on X said for a few months there, the future is autonomous.
All right. The future is autonomous. The Model S and Model X theoretically could be autonomous vehicles. So I don't think this is... there's lots of theories, we'll say. and I'm not going to entertain them any one specifically other than my own. But there are theories on why Tesla is doing this, right? It's a business decision. In 2025, they delivered less than 51,000 Model S, Model X's, and Cybertrucks. So 3 different vehicles sold less than 51,000 total, or less than 51,000 were delivered. These aren't great numbers for a car company. If these vehicles, and they are more expensive, but if these vehicles were, I don't know, let's say $1 million a piece, that's a great business. $100,000 a piece on average, we'll say, not as good. It's not bad, but there's probably better uses for that space. And I think that the Model S and Model X, they just weren't selling. Unfortunately, I do feel as if some of the focus of electric vehicles, sometimes I feel this way, the Tesla isn't focusing on it as much. They're just kind of keeping, it seems like, I'm not saying they are, but it seems like they're just trying to keep a placeholder until they can move in like the Cybercab or, any other vehicle that would just drive itself. Like for a while, we would listen to these earnings calls and Elon would talk about the new products that are coming out and we're going to be super stoked about them. $25,000 or more affordable car. And that talk has pretty much disappeared. Tesla does see a vision for the future. I do not know if it is in fact going to be, they might be those folks that are running up the hill first and catching all the arrows, and then the people behind them eventually succeed at this because the folks slinging arrows ran out of arrows. Tesla might find themselves to be a little bit more, that first mover position is not always an advantage. Sometimes you're going to make a lot of mistakes and you're going to fail. And you know what? I don't want Tesla to fail as a company, but if it does, companies fail all the time. Other than the people who work there, and I want them to all be successful and have jobs, I don't have any major feelings one way or the other if a company fails or doesn't. I feel for the people who lose their jobs, and I might like the company's product, but when we're looking at cars, and in particular electric cars, there are plenty of other companies that are building cars. By the way, if I could just kind of roll back a little bit, yesterday it was dark and I was driving out of my neighborhood, and like one street north of me, there's a BYD Shark parked. And of course, it's got Mexico plates because you can't buy BYDs here in the U.S. And there's a vehicle parked behind that one, which also has Mexico plates, Sonoran plates, which was the Bronco, the nice refreshed Bronco. And both those cars next to each other look fantastic, by the way. I'm not a fan of the BYD grill. It gives me too much of a Lordstown feeling. And so in terms of, the grill itself, it's not a great grill as far as I'm concerned, but the truck itself looks really good. Today I was taking some lunch to my wife and it was still there. So, after I took lunch to her, I came back and I was driving around it and being real creepy. Just looking at the car itself, the truck itself. And, it's got a little bit of a short bed, but it's fine. It's a nice looking truck. It's an E-Rev as far as I know. I don't think they make a fully electric version of it, but let's call a win a win. That's a truck a lot of people would be happy with, and it's affordable. If Tesla goes out of business, there are other companies out there to make electric cars. I would be very sad if cars in general went away without a really cool substitution. Like, I'd be bummed if cars went away and we went back to horses. I don't know if that's the best solution. But if Tesla goes away, that sucks, but it's not the end of the world. I don't want them to go away. They have a lot of employees. I'd like to keep them those employees employed. And I do enjoy Tesla products. I love my Model Y. I think it's great. But yeah, they are definitely pointing their ship in a certain direction, and hopefully it pays off for them and it doesn't bite them in the rear end, because it could. We still have I heard, I don't know. I've listened and seen so many things this morning. You'll have to forgive me. So I'm not exactly sure where I saw this, but somebody said, well, Tesla still has 2 products left. And it might have been on Twitter or X. And in my head, I'm like, Tesla has 3. I mean, 2 cars left. And they have 3. They have the Cybertruck. If you take out the Model S and X, it's just the 3, the Y, and the Cybertruck. But the Cybertruck sells so few, I wouldn't, like, it would have made sense for me for Tesla to be like, you know what, we're done with the S, X, and Cybertruck. That would have made more sense financially. But what are you going to do? They don't build the Cybertruck in Fremont. They build it in Texas. But it wouldn't be surprising if the Cybertruck wasn't next, so that they could make room for the Cybercab production, which is supposed to be in Texas. But yeah, I mean, I'm down for the robots. Don't get me wrong. A lot of things are going to have to change in terms of what Elon's vision is with AI for me to want one of these things in my house now, because the stuff with the Grok, and a couple of years ago, Tesla employees got in trouble because they were caught sending around stuff that the videos that the car picked up. I would be less likely to have that in my house. If I lived alone, I don't think it would bother me, but I do have, a wife, a daughter, and a son that I wouldn't want them walking out of the shower or walking around the house, and somebody sharing that within Tesla headquarters. That wouldn't make me very happy. So yeah, I would be less likely to buy a Tesla robot now, knowing what I know, than when Tesla announced it a few years ago. All right, let's Let's continue with Elon's opening remarks.
So let's say, with respect to full self-driving and robotaxi, people are obviously following with very close attention the progress of FSD, and you can experience it for yourself. If you've got a Tesla, you notice with every software update, the car gets better and better at autonomy, and we're we're able to do our first rides with no safety monitor in the car in Austin. These are paid rides, so these are just sort of randomly selected paid rides with no safety monitor, and we're, I think maybe as of maybe yesterday or so, we actually don't even have a chase car or anything like that. So these are just cars with no people in them, and no one's following the car in Austin. So we obviously are being very cautious about this, because we want to have no injuries or serious accidents along the way. So I think it makes sense to be very cautious, but you'll see the amount of autonomy increase dramatically, I think, every month, essentially. So, and then there will also be an opportunity, something we've talked about for a long time, for existing owners of Teslas to add or subtract their cars to the fleet, kind of like how Airbnb works, where you can add or subtract your house to the Airbnb inventory. And I think probably the value of the Tesla, the sort of partial people adding or subtracting their cars to Tesla autonomous fleet is probably a little underweighted by a lot of people, because we've got millions of cars with AI4 that can do this. So, it's that it might potentially, I think it will provide an opportunity for a lot of customers to earn more by lending their car to the fleet than their lease cost to Tesla. Which is it's kind of like you get in that scenario, you basically get paid to own a Tesla. It's quite a good scenario.
So, yeah, you know what? Uh, I don't think hardware 4, we're going to be able to add our cars to the network if you have hardware 4. But if you could, right? And you were allowed to do it with a lease, and I didn't get dinged on the miles that were driven under the autonomous taxi, the robo taxi, because if you're getting 20,000 miles on a lease and it's driving 18,000 miles in the autonomous taxi mode, you don't really get a big benefit from that. But I would lease a car in a heartbeat. I don't want somebody to ruin my car because I keep my cars for a long time. But if Elon's okay with me paying him $600 a month for a lease, and I'm earning back $650 or whatever, and I'm paying $50 on top of that for the robotax or the autonomous driving, sign me up. Like, that sounds fine. I would be fine doing that. Actually, I might have 2 if it had worked out, but I don't know that hardware 4 is going to get us there. And I don't know that folks with hardware 4 they're going to have that opportunity. So I'm not saying it's not. When this comes down to it, hopefully, when hardware 5 comes out, maybe that will get us closer to what that reality looks like. Then great. I think that's awesome. Then I also, when he was talking, I'm glad he acknowledged the fact that Tesla had a chase car, and now they're not using chase cars. Because again, like I said the other day, I don't think that it's bad that Tesla was using a chase car. I think that's responsible. I think, the messaging and leaving the fact that there's a chase car out when there's obviously a chase car behind it, I think that ruins the message. So kudos to Elon for acknowledging it. And then I was thinking about this, I wish I had 2 friends who were married that were both engineers. And one had a Model 3 with hardware 3, and one had a Model Y with hardware 4. And I really wish, and I don't know if I know this is a big wish, and nobody out there fits this description. I would be curious as to if we took the same route in the same location, and even through an Uber, if you lived in the LA area and you threw an Uber in there, not Uber, but a Waymo in there to kind of get a comparison, and then inviting said imaginary couple onto the show to talk about this. I'm going to have to search my Rolodex and see if there's anybody out there who meets this description. But yeah, I think that'd be interesting to compare hardware 3, hardware 4, and also Waymo, if those are available in the area that you happen to live. Anywho, let's go ahead and continue with Elon's opening remarks.
And we expect to have fully autonomous vehicles in, probably, I don't know, somewhere between a quarter and half of the United States by the end of the year, pending regulatory approval. A big factor would be if there's some kind of federal preemption for autonomous vehicles. In the absence of that, you kind of have to go on a city by city or state by state basis. But nonetheless, we even if it is city by city, state by state, we expect to be in, I don't know, dozens of major cities by the end of the year. With respect to energy, the Tesla energy team has done incredible work, and the growth rate on that is continuing to be very strong, and we're building more manufacturing capacity, and expect that and energy will have very high growth for really as far into the future as we can imagine. The solar opportunity is underestimated. We think the best way to add significant capability to the grid is, or not even to the grid, let's say it's powering AI data centers, is solar and batteries on Earth and solar in space. So that's why we're going to work towards getting 100 gigawatts a year of solar cell production, integrating across the entire supply chain from raw materials all the way to finished solar panels.
I don't have much to say on the energy update. And as far as the autonomous driving stuff goes, we'll see. Let's move on.
Maybe a bit more about Optimus. We'll probably unveil Optimus 3 in a few months. And I think it's going to be quite surprising to people. It's an incredibly capable robot. And as I mentioned, we're replacing the SX line in Fremont with a million unit per year line of Optimus. Now, because it is a completely new supply chain, there's really nothing from the existing supply chain that exists in Optimus. Everything is designed from physics first principles. So that means the normal S-curve of manufacturing ramp will be longer for Optimus than it is for products that have at least some portion of an existing supply chain. Like when everything's new, the production rate will be proportionate to the least lucky, least confident part of the entire supply chain. And if there's 10,000 things that need to go right, it's, it only takes one to be slow to lag that. But so it will be sort of a stretched out S-curve, but I'm confident that we'll get to 1 million units a year of in Fremont of Optimus 3. And this Optimus really will be a general purpose robot that can learn by observing human behavior. So you can like demonstrate a task or literally verbally describe a task or show it a task, even show it a video, and it will be able to do that task. So it's going to be a very capable robot. I think long-term Optimus will have a very significant impact on the U.S. GDP. Like it will actually move the needle on U.S. GDP significantly.
I mean, I hope so. Like that is certainly not something that I don't want to see the vision fail. However, I mean, it goes back down to, I don't know. I'll talk about this more a little bit. I feel like I've beaten it up pretty good. 1 million units from the space where the S and X are at Fremont. I'm not saying that's impossible because I don't know how big that space is, but it does seem like a lot of units out of a small amount of space. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla, if they ever had the demand for 1 million Optimus robots, 1 million a year, I would imagine, if I had to guess, that they would have to find a different place to build those robots to get to 1 million. It does seem like that would be a difficult thing to do, but then again, I don't know how much space they need. So maybe they can put 10,000 lines in the Model S and Model X space. I doubt it, but let's get to Elon's closing remarks for his opening remarks.
So, in conclusion, there's still obviously many who doubt our ambitions for creating amazing abundance, but we're confident it can be done, and that we're making the right moves technologically to ensure that it does. And Tesla's obviously never been a company to shy away from solving some of the hardest problems. It's I think that's kind of how you build value in a company, is you solve hard problems. It's like, I don't know how you create value by solving easy problems. So there's a lot of hard problems that the Tesla team is going to solve, but it's an incredibly talented, hardworking team. And I'd like to thank actually everyone at Tesla for their incredible hard work. And it's an honor to work with such a talented group. So thank you to everyone who is supporting this mission. The future is more exciting than you can imagine.
All right. I'm not going to continue on down the path of talking about Elon's opening remarks and amazing abundance. Next up, we have Chief Financial Officer Vibhav Taneja, and he is going to give us like an update on, Tesla's financials. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just going to cut this up so that it makes sense and try to play it all at one time rather than interrupt. But if he says something specifically that I think I need to address, I will interrupt. But this is just going to be kind of, this is going to be edited down for time. All right, let's get to Vibhav.
So Q4 25 was an interesting quarter in a couple of respects. On the autos front, while in Q3 we saw a surge in US demand before the IRA consumer credit cliff, pulling in some demand from Q4. In other parts of the world, we saw increase in demand leading to record deliveries in smaller countries like Malaysia, Norway, Poland, Saudi Arabia, and Taiwan, while continued strength in the rest of APAC and EMEA. We therefore ended 2025 with a bigger backlog than in recent years. Note that none of these countries have the latest version of FSD supervised available yet. On the storage front, we hit yet another record in terms of deployments. I would like to thank our customers and Tesla in continuing this momentum. On the automotive margins front, automotive margins excluding credits improved sequentially from 15.4% to 17.9%. The automotive gross profit was flat sequentially despite 16% lower deliveries, primarily due to regional mix as we had proportionately more deliveries in APAC and EMEA. As we look to 2026, with the progress that has been made with autonomy, our focus is on ramping production at all our factories. Our biggest constraint globally continues to be on the battery pack front. While our teams have been creative in trying to resolve the situation by now putting 4680 cells in non-structural packs, we continue to iterate, improving things from here on. FSD adoption continued to improve in the quarter, reaching nearly 1.1 million paid customers globally. Of these, nearly 70% were upfront purchases.
Okay, so that's not 1.1 million paid FSD purchases and subscriptions in a quarter. That's globally for the entire time. And I don't know that Tesla's ever really said that out loud, but that's interesting. And I'm sure we're going to get something from an analyst about that. 70% of that, so we'll say 750,000 of those were people who paid up front for that. Now, my curiosity is, FSD wasn't always called FSD. It's gone by a number of different names. Are they including the people who have purchased autopilot or enhanced autopilot? Are they including people who have purchased, autonomous driving software for hardware too? Is that included in your number? I mean, it's not a lot of people in terms of folks who had hardware too and purchased the autonomous driving, because Tesla wasn't selling a great number of cars back then. But yeah, I have way more questions on how that goes. But if more than 70% or 70% of your base, your customers were buying FSD and only 30% were leasing, it seems weird to kick out the buyers. Like, I still don't think, like, Tesla sold somewhere in total around 9 million cars. So, what is that? 10% of people have opted for FSD. If you include subscriptions, that doesn't seem like a lot. That seems like a fairly low number. Yeah, that's interesting to me. Of course, that 8.5 million or 9 million cars that Tesla sold, some of those were on the old Mobileye, and some of them were roadsters that didn't have any of this technology. And then, Some of them are hardware too. But in general, there wasn't a lot of those cars sold when you compare to the cars with Model 3 and Hardware 3, Hardware 4. Oh, and you know what? I I mentioned that, Tesla still sells the Model 3, the Model Y, and the Cybertruck, but they also sell the Tesla Semi, and Viv have brought that up, so I should include that. And then the new Roadster, which Tesla's already said they're not going to make very many of, and the Cybercab are two other cars. I can't remember quite if I mentioned that or not, but anyway, now I'm mentioning it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with our retail investor questions. Here's the first one.
Are there still plans to launch new models to address different price segments and vehicle types, which could materially expand the TAM for Tesla?
Yeah. To further on what we were just talking about, we've launched our least expensive models ever over the last few months and are continuing to expand those models globally. And over the last decade, we have continually brought down the cost of our vehicles without sacrificing range, performance, or premiumness. And we'll continue to do that, as Vaibhav said, investing in our factories. But these are all trade-offs of where we spend our time or money. And to Elon's point just now, with Cybercab coming, we are aiming to bring that Tesla premium ride experience to our largest market yet. That could be 5 or 10 times our current levels of production. This new autonomous market, you have to start thinking about us as moving to providing transportation as a service more than the total addressable market for the purchased vehicles alone. And of course, we do have plans to have robotaxis in various shapes and sizes, but obviously Cybercab will be the grand majority of that volume.
Yeah, the vast majority of miles traveled will be autonomous in the future. I would say probably less than, I'm just guessing, but probably less than 5% of miles driven will be where somebody's actually driving the car themselves in the future, maybe as low as 1%.
Well, as somebody who likes to own their own car and drive and have options, that doesn't sound good. That sounds like, they're going to build cars, but they're going to be autonomous. They'll be for the fleet. Are they going to build them for us? Or are they just building them for them? That's a question that I have for that. Well, that wasn't 100% clear. Also, I do believe an autonomous car future. I'm not sure we agree on the same timeline for an autonomous car future. So I'm happy that Tesla and other companies are exploring this. However, storming that hill, Microsoft at one point in time thought the internet was stupid, and they lost a lot of market share to a company that is very little known today, but it was called Google. Yeah, Microsoft could have probably crushed Google back in the day, and Netscape, had they taken the internet a little bit more seriously early on, but they didn't. And I'm curious is if this is the kind of the opposite thing where Elon and Tesla are taking an autonomous future, a robotic future, an AI future, and putting too much of a bet on it, versus making reasonable steps as it develops. We're still early on in this stuff, so to kind of move all your chips on red when, the game is still being played, there's plenty of night left. It seems like a lot. Tesla they are diversified. They do have the energy business and, the robotic business and the car business. But yeah, it is an interesting, brave. It's brave or foolish. We'll see where it ends up being. Elon's still going to be rich when this is all said and done. So it really doesn't matter if it fails or not. He'll still come out of this with plenty of money. And probably everybody that is sitting on this earnings call will still have plenty of money, no matter if it fails or not. Now, the people who work for the company and the investors, especially the general retail investors, where they'll land, that remains to be seen. But if it succeeds, everybody succeeds. So let's hope that it succeeds. Let's move on to our next question.
Historically, Tesla has spoken about gross margin per model. Are there standalone gross margin targets for the current models, excluding the benefits for FSD sales?
We've talked about this with the previous two questions, but transportation, as we know, is changing. And I think we cannot keep applying the same framework from a car sales model to the future, what we are trying to do. So it has to be looked at it more holistically. Autonomy software will be the driver for growth from now on. And as we aim to maximize the global fleet, we've been laser focused on COGS from our side to make sure, because that is something which we manage. So we will keep focusing on that, but I think we need to look at it from a different dimension.
Yeah, like this Cybercab, the whole design of Cybercab was to optimize the fully considered cost per mile of autonomous driving. And it's a different design problem than if you're trying to design cars for people who will be driving versus being driven. So Cybercab is like I said, super optimized for minimum cost per mile and also for a much higher duty cycle. So it would expect Cybercab to be used, probably 50 or 60 hours a week instead of the 10 or 11 hours a week that a driven vehicle is used. So, typically people might drive their car for an hour and a half a day on average. So it's like 10 hours per week out of 168. But I think an autonomous vehicle is likely to be used probably 5 times as often, which means that you need to design the vehicle for a much more wear and tear per unit time and much more resilience. It's more like a commercial truck that's in continuous operation or close to continuous operation is how you design an autonomous vehicle. And so we will have larger vehicles in the Cybercab in the future that are designed for full autonomy. And we've actually shown pictures of this, and in fact have shown prototypes. So this is not exactly a secret. In fact, we've given people rides in them. So we're not keeping this hiding this light under a bushel here. It's like we're literally saying what we're going to do and have said what we're going to do for a while. I think long term we would really the only vehicles that we'll make will be autonomous vehicles, with the exception of the next generation Roadster, which we're hoping to debut in April. Hopefully, it's going to be something out of this world.
Fantastic.
That's not how I would describe it as fantastic. Yeah. Are they moving more and more away from a car company? I don't think so, but they are moving more and more away from it sounds like moving more and more away from a company that you or I could purchase a car from, maybe. It's not like Uber, or not Uber, Lyft. No, not Lyft. Waymo. Geez, I'll get it right. Waymo makes, has their own cars. They don't make them, I guess. They mod them to meet their needs. Maybe there's a day where Waymo will build their own cars. But yeah, it seems weird because this whole question was talking about margins. And it went down the road of, well, yeah, I mean, that becomes less and less important now that we have this FSD subscription we're forcing people to do if they want to have that feature. They're not forcing anybody to subscribe, but they're forcing you to subscribe over paying for it if you would like to have that feature. And eventually you'll be paying more for it. But yeah, I don't know. This is a weird answer. That wasn't even an answer. That was a weird way to answer the question because they asked you about margin. So I'm guessing the margins are not as good as they had been in the past, if I had to guess. And then listen, the world's a topsy-turvy place. We got lots of tariffs and a bunch of other stuff. So margins shrink when that kind of thing happens, unless you're building everything in the country that you're selling in, and that's difficult to do. So, of course, that's going to eat into your margins. Let's move on to the next question.
What is the current bottleneck to increased robotaxi deployment and personal use unsupervised FSD? The safety and performance of the most recent models. Is it the safety and performance of the most recent models, or is it people to monitor the robotaxis in car or remotely, or is there some other blocker? I don't know, Shok, if you want to kick off on this one.
Yeah, we have scaled the robotaxi service that's available to customers over the last year in order to just learn the scaling problems without having to wait for unsupervised. Basically, like two goals. One is learn as much as possible from the fleet with the safety monitors, and secondly, be laser focused with the engineering team to solve the unsupervised FSD problem. I think we did both. By the end of last year, we had a long tail of issues that we were able to churn through, and then in the last couple of weeks, we had started our unsupervised robotaxi service to public customers in Austin. I think some customers took rides last week, and also the service continues today without any rear car or something like that. Separately, we did scale the fleet size in the Bay Area and in Austin, and through that, we learned issues with charging and other issues that we would have seen once we scale the unsupervised fleet. So both are happening in parallel. A variant of the software that's used for the robotaxi service was shipped to customers with V14, and customers saw a huge jump in performance, a lot of happy feedback from customers. And since then, we have improved the software significantly as well. And customers will continue to see with their own software releases that the software is so good that they're screaming to remove the driver monitoring software because they're bored inside the car too much.
Adding to that a little bit with what Ashok said about learning about our charging and service needs, we're using our vast network of charging and service centers that really only Tesla has in this space to jumpstart our infrastructure build-out needs to get ahead of robotaxi and autonomous vehicle demand. And we expect that because of this network, we are the only company capable of scaling at the rate that is needed for the tsunami of autonomy that is coming.
Yeah.
Do you know what this reminds me of? Back in the day when I was young and I smoked weed, we would all sit around in a sauna or in somebody's house or outside, wherever we could smoke weed, we'd smoke weed. And it just kind of came down to, you're the best. No, you're the best. No, that's not correct. You're the best. I think we just got into a you're the best earnings call. We're going to do autonomous driving. No. Yeah, let's do autonomous driving. That's the best idea ever. And it might be. I mean, I was the vice president of the Go Nowhere Do Nothing Club when I got out of high school. The president, by the way, became the president because I declined to be the president because I didn't feel like that was a right to be the president of the Go Nowhere Do Nothing Club. I feel like that was too much achieving. So I chose vice president. By the way, that was a real club. And that guy became a Marine and did great things, is doing great things. He's still doing it. So he failed at the Go Nowhere Do Nothing Club. Anyway, this just seems like everybody sitting in a room and insulating themselves. And seems like I'm not saying it is, I'm saying it seems like they're insulated and in their own little echo chamber. And they've convinced themselves that this is the way to go. And hopefully it is. Again, I don't want them to fail, but goodness gracious. Do you know that one person that went to maybe they went to the Bahamas, right? It's not exactly exotic to go to the Bahamas anymore. It might be unusual because, it's still a major destination, but I've never been to the Bahamas. But that one person that goes and they just talk about it incessantly because they went abroad. I was talking to a young firefighter 10 or 15 years ago, so he's not young anymore. And I was like, do you do any traveling? And he's like, yeah, I've been abroad a couple of times. I was like, oh, really? Where? And he goes, Rocky Point, Mexico. I was like, buddy, that's 3 hours from Phoenix. It's not abroad. That's not. He's like, well, I've been to Puerto Vallarta too. I was like, that's good. It's really, we're still on the same continent. It's kind of feels like that, right? They're talking about this great thing, but they're only doing it to each other. Let's get some outside voices in here. It seems like, all right, I've made enough terrible metaphors and told enough terrible stories. I wish I could name this episode the Go Nowhere Do Nothing Club. I have a lot of fond memories of that club. Anyway, it wasn't an official club. It was just something my friend Brent and I talked about. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. This podcast is going nowhere and doing nothing.
Great. Fantastic.
Talk to me like that, bro. Anyway, let's move on. Enough of the silliness. Let's move on to the next question.
Moving on to the next question.
I just said that.
After the unveil of the Cybertruck, Elon stated that if it didn't sell well, Tesla would build a more conventional-looking pickup. How practical would it be to create this new design on the Cybertruck architecture, and could it be conveniently built on the existing production lines?
Actually, in its segment, Cybertruck continues to be a leader and is selling more than any other electric truck out there, while our competition continues to pull back. But to the question itself, from a line standpoint, we always design our lines to be super flexible. We built 3 and Y on the same line. We built S and X on the same line still, showing that we can do that. The Cybertruck line was designed in the same way and is one of our most fully ready for autonomy platforms.
Yeah. We will transition the Cybertruck line to just a fully autonomous line. And there's obviously a market there for cargo delivery, like you say, like localized cargo delivery within a city, within a few hundred miles, something like that. There's a lot of cargo that needs to move locally within a city, and an autonomous Cybertruck could be very useful for that.
You didn't answer the question. The Cybertruck, I don't know what metric you're using by saying the Cybertruck is one of the best-selling cars or vehicles in its class. If we are comparing it to other electric pickup trucks, maybe. There's not a lot of them out there. So if you want to say it's in the top 10, congratulations. But you sold 51,000, under 51,000 Model S, X, and Cybertrucks. So let's conservatively say you sold 30,000 Cybertrucks in 2025. It's not a win. That's not a win. I would give you, if you sold 100,000 Cybertrucks in 2025, I'd be like, you know what? That's pretty good. It's an expensive car. It's unusual looking. You know, there's some quirks. It comes with a little bit of baggage for some people. That's a win. But no, you've sold, I don't know how many, I'm not going to say, but you sold less than 50,000 Cybertrucks in 2025. That is not a win. It's time for a more conventional looking pickup truck. And it's also time to answer the question. You know, they kind of answer the question saying, well, you can build a Model S or Model X on the same line, or a Model 3 and a Model Y on the same line. Great. Could you build a traditional truck, not a truck that's made out of stainless steel, but like a traditional looking truck on the Cybertruck line? And I think that it is like, I think we got led into a little bit of a last mile delivery thing with, you know, there's lots of deliveries that could be made. The Cybertruck has a weird, listen, it's going to sound like I'm bashing the Cybertruck. I'm not. Like, I think the Cybertruck still looks really cool. I would still like to own one. Maybe not now, and that isn't because of any political thing. It's because more of, I would like to have a few iterations under the belt before going down the road of owning one. If I was going to pay that much money, it would have to be like exceptional. If the price came down to like $40,000, like they said it was going to be, or $50,000 for the mid-tier, be hard for me to say no if I was looking for a car. But yeah, the question is would you do it, and would it be difficult to do? Not how easy it is to make the line autonomous. If you're only building 30,000 cars for a year, and I'm only using 30,000 because I'm taking half of the 50,000 and then I'm adding a little bit to it to be gracious. It's not a lot, you know. Let me look at I'm gonna pull up a calculator here. This is, I'm gonna say 30,000 divided by 52. So that's 576 trucks a week divided by 7. That's 82 trucks a day divided by 3 shifts. That's 27 trucks a shift. You know, we're not rocking and rolling with those numbers. So, I don't know. That answer irritated me. I don't know if you could tell. Anyway, let's move on to the next question, because good Lord, this might be a 2-hour-long podcast.
As it relates to Robotaxi, what has surprised you about the rollout so far? We've talked about what's constrained the fleet expansion to date, but it appears there are 200 vehicles based on public tracking. Is that something that we can confirm?
I wouldn't say there's anything that like really surprised us because we are a large fleet, we had all the metrics, so there was not sort of a surprise. It was just continued work to grind down on the long tail of issues, and that's what enabled us to launch the unsupervised service in Austin.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of robotaxi vehicles carrying paid customers, I think we're well over 500 at this point between the Bay Area and Austin.
We're varying amounts of like vehicles depending on the load, but yeah, you can have like more vehicles during like peak times and then like fewer vehicles in the off hours.
Yeah. This will probably double every month type of thing. It's on an exponential curve.
I mean, one other thing people forget that, we've been deliberate on all this in the sense that we have the supporting infrastructure already being in place, whether it's service centers, charging. Yes, we'll have to augment as the fleet grows, depending upon the density of where the demand is and whatnot. But it's not something like we just stumbled upon it and we're starting to. We've been at it for years. Yes, not every city is designed the same way. Same thing. Our infrastructure is also not the same in every city, but you have to give us credit that it's been a journey. And like Lars said, if there's some company which can do it, we've already been at it, so we should be able to deliver much better.
All right. I wasn't going to include this question. I was actually about ready to cut it until Vibhav mentioned that, you have to give us a little bit of credit. There are hard things that we need to solve, and we're doing it. And one side, I do a little bit agree with that. Tesla deserves some credit. On the other side, they're not the only one. They're operating in a similar way that Waymo, Zoox, Motional, all of these other companies, they're not miles ahead of them. The reason why this question is valid is because of the promises that were promised and never delivered on. Just like last episode, we talked about how Elon said in an earnings call that half of the population in the U.S. would have a robotaxi available to them by the end of the year. That was 6 months. It wasn't even 6 months. It was 5 months for that to happen. Like, your frustration that people are asking these questions, kind of that validity for you to be frustrated goes out the window when those kind of promises are being made. And it's not to say that, Tesla is incapable. They have very smart engineers and smart people running the company. And I don't think Elon's a dummy. I think Elon is quite smart. So, on one side of this, well, just on the one specific side of people wanting to know, like, are there only 200 cars operated in Austin and San Francisco? I think that's a valid question. especially from an investor, not from me. I mean, if I ask that question, they can tell me to pound sand. But when someone put money in your company, answer the question, and then don't be like, well, you got to give us some credit. No, you don't get all the credit that you want when you have failed to deliver on promises. And, you have millions of dollars in the bank and you're still failing to deliver on promises. Like, these are people who these are retail investors. We haven't even got to analyst questions yet. These are just retail investors asking questions. People who are not institutional, but people who are putting their own money into the company and believe in it. So, yeah, this is a question I would have asked, and I wasn't going to not include it because of the question. I wasn't going to include it because I don't think the answer was sufficient. But yeah, Tesla and other companies get a lot of credit for where they are currently in terms of autonomous driving. But you don't get to be like, well, come on, guys. Stop being so, you're just asking these questions. You got to give us a little bit of time. You're the one that set the timeline. Like, we didn't set the timeline. These timeline and expectations were set by people very high up. I would dare say the top of the company. So when people ask, where are we at on this? Valid. Totally valid. If I worked for a company and they said, hey, can you load 5 boxes in the back of the truck by this afternoon? 5, reasonably sized Apple boxes in the back of the truck. And I'm like, duh, I could do 1 million in the back of the truck. And they're like, 1 million? You're going to fit 1 million Apple boxes in the back of the truck? I'm like, heck yeah. And then when somebody's like, hey, where are you at on those Apple boxes 3 hours later? And I'm like, oh, come on, man. That's a lot. Do you understand how Tetris works? Like, these things, it's harder than you think. Like, I'm the one that made the promise. I wish I was still in the go nowhere, do nothing club right now. Let's continue on. Liz, I've told people my theory on this in the past, but when Tesla has a long opening remarks from the CEO and long opening remarks from the CFO, which I don't know that they were super long, but when that happens and they take a lot of retail questions and they don't talk to the analysts, that signals to me a bad quarter. And to this point, we're almost all the way through the earnings call, and we still have not heard from the analysts.
The secret is out. With millions of younger-looking customers across the country, Plexiderm is one of the most highly sought-after products on the market. It visibly shrinks under-eye bags and smooths out crow's feet in minutes, and the effects last up to 10 hours. Influencers love it, magazines feature it, and people just can't get enough of it. As a matter of fact, Elle Magazine gave it an Editor's Choice Award as Best Instant Wrinkle Filler for 2025. In as little as 10 minutes, Plexiderm reduces the appearance of fine lines, wrinkles, and those dreaded under-eye bags. So yes, you can look years younger in minutes, and the effects last for hours. No surgery, no gimmicks, just results. The best news, you can try Plexiderm for only $14.95. Plus, get free shipping. Don't wait. Order Plexiderm today. Visit plexiderm.com/special. That's plexiderm.com/special. Paid for by Sheer Science.
All right, let's move on to the next retail investor question.
Great. The next question is about chase cars, which we already covered. So moving on to the last question. Elon, you've been spending significant personal time on Tesla's chip design.
Yeah.
What was the forcing function behind this increased involvement? And do you think external chip sales will represent a significant portion of Tesla's valuation by the end of the decade?
Well, I mean, I tend to spend time on whatever the most critical issue is for the company, and completing the AI5 chip design and having it be a great chip is arguably the number one most critical thing to get done, which is why I'm spending more time on that than currently anything else at Tesla. spent pretty much every Saturday on this, and a chunk of every Tuesday. So it's like if I'm spending my Saturdays on something, it's going to be something pretty important. I do think AI5 will be a very good chip, and I feel quite confident about the design at this point. And then AI6, which will follow that, it'll be aspirationally would follow that in under a year, will be yet another big leap beyond AI5. So I feel pretty good about our chip strategy right now. But in terms of selling it outside of Tesla, we first need to make sure we have enough chips for all of our vehicle production and all of our Optimus production, and then we will actually use the AI5 chips in our data centers. We already use the AI4 chips in our data centers. So when we do training, it's a combination of the AI4 chips and NVIDIA hardware primarily that we do training with. So, but you say by the end of the decade, I mean, that's like things are changing so fast that it's hard to imagine like what happens at the end of the decade. I mean, we might. I mean, when I look ahead at say what's the limiting factor for Tesla growth, if you go say 3 or 4 years out, I think it actually is chip production. Is there enough AI logic and enough AI and enough memory, enough RAM for our volume? And right now, I see that as being the thing that probably limits our growth in 3 or 4 years, which would imply that we're not selling chips outside of Tesla because we need them. In fact, I think I think it's going to make sense, and this is definitely going to be a sort of a controversial thing, but I think Tesla needs to build a terafab. I mentioned this at the shareholder meeting, but even when we look at the output of the best case output of all of our key suppliers, and I'd say even they're beyond suppliers, they're like strategic partners, like Samsung, TSMC, and Micron. And we say like, what's the most you could possibly make? Then it's not enough. So I think in order to remove the constraint, the probable constraint in 3 or 4 years, we're going to have to build a Tesla terafab, a very big fab that includes logic, memory, and packaging domestically. And that's actually also going to be very important to ensure that we are protected against any geopolitical risks. I think people may be underweighting some of the geopolitical risks that are going to be a major factor in a few years. So now, a lot of people will say that's crazy. Fabs are really hard. I'm like, yes, I know fabs are really hard. I don't think they're easy. But
we do hard things.
We do a lot of hard things. We didn't used to have car factories. We didn't used to have battery cell factories or lithium refineries or mega pack factories or all these other things. We figured it out. So I think it's I think if we don't do the Tesla terafab, we're going to be limited by supplier output of chips, and I think maybe memory is an even bigger limiter than AI logic. So for example, we have chip supply deals with TSMC in Arizona and Samsung in Texas, but currently there are no advanced memory fabs at scale in the United States. There are zero, literally zero. Hopefully Micron will have something going in a few years because they're all headquartered in Idaho, where they make a lot of potato chips. We need to make computer chips too. Anyway, we're working with our strategic partners on the chip front, memory and logic. But I think we got to also try our hand at building a large scale fab that integrates logic, memory, and packaging. And if we don't do that, we're just going to be fundamentally limited by supply chain, especially if there's some if in a worst case geopolitical situation, it would be quite a severe situation. So I think it would be, quite frankly, it'd be crazy not to try the Terra fab. So yeah, right. We'll have a bigger announcement on this in the future.
I don't know if it came through in Vibhav's opening remarks or in Elon's opening remarks, or if I cut it out, but Elon said that they're going to make a lot of capital expenditures over the next, bit of time because, the things they want to do, it takes money, right? And investment. And we talked about the R&D place that they built next to Fremont. So making their own fab to develop their own chip doesn't surprise me. It's a lot of money, but it doesn't surprise me. And it sounds like they're going to use all of their own chips where they can. Here's the thing that the issue that I have with the comment about Micron. I used to work at one of those Micron plants in Nampa. We built motherboards for companies for, like Compact and Dell and things like that. I don't know if it was specifically for those companies. It's been so long ago. But when we're talking almost 30 years ago, I worked there. That part of Idaho has is a pretty decent tech scene. There's a huge HP plant, or used to be. I don't know if it's still there. Used to be a huge HP plant in Idaho, just outside of Boise. So yeah, that's by the way, it's not Boise. There's no Z. The people there will be very angry at you. But I lived in Idaho for a long time, and I worked inspecting motherboards, and I also worked a little bit of soldering on the for broken solders and stuff like that. A little bit, not too much. And I started there working for security for a third-party company. So I say all that to say this: don't talk smack about Idaho and their tech sector, because they have lots of stuff there. Okay, we're finally ready for analyst questions, and we're not going to get very many of them, to be honest with you. But let's go ahead and start with our first analyst question. And we're not getting very many because I'm editing, because Tesla left so little time to do the analyst questions. All right, here we go. First question.
Great, thank you so much. It's Emmanuel Rosner from Wolf Research. My first question is on the capex. You signal a pretty large increase to over $20 billion for this year. Was hoping to better understand where the investments are going. Any way to dimension for us which of the product line or technologies account for the bulk of the increase? And also, do you view this as like one time in nature, 2026, or I guess how much of this is an ongoing level of high spending for a number of years? And then just finally, still on that, with that level of spending, you're going to be burning cash. How should we think about the cash balance or any other way to finance this?
Yeah, so, Emmanuel, I tried to put this in my opening remarks too, but I'll try and go a little bit deeper. There's about 6 factories which we are starting production in this year. So there's a lot of capex which is going into that. Then as we are trying to scale Optimus, we need a lot more compute. So we're putting more money towards compute as well. And then
for training.
Yeah. And then we're also going to be spending money to expand the capacity at at existing factories. On top of it, we're just keep in mind that none of these numbers which I shared of 20 billion factors in anything to do with the solar fab or the semiconductor chip fab. Those would be, as Elon mentioned, would come later on. And you think your second part of your question was, is this one-off or would we expect more? I think we're getting into this investment phase because we have big aspirations. And when you look at it, some of these aspirations I call them as infrastructure play, especially if you have to do a chip fab and we have to do a solar cell manufacturing fab. Those are infrastructure plays. And that funding takes a little bit longer. And you would be in an investment cycle for a little bit longer. Initially, third part of your question was, how are we going to fund it? Initially, obviously, we have over $44 billion of cash and investments on the books. So we'll use our internal resources, but there are ways where we can fund it, especially when we look at the robotaxi fleet, because, anytime you have a consistent stream of cash flow, you can go and get money from the banks. And we have had conversations with banks about it. And that is something how we're going to do it. And then on the infrastructure play side, like I said, we don't have a number yet. But given that it's an infrastructure play, it's a longer tail, we will have to look at a little bit more in terms of how we fund it, whether it's through more debt or other means.
So their plan is to use the robotaxi funds to go to the bank and say, hey, look at all this money that we're making. Maybe this is why we're getting the messaging that they're going to be across the United States. When in reality, we were supposed to cover half of the United States in 5 months. What can we realistically expect in we'll say charitably 11 months that we have left? I'd be surprised if we were at 10%. I would be surprised if the money that they made off of robotaxi, based on the numbers that Elon gave us a while ago, made much of a dent in their overall gross income for 2026. So I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I'm not a business person, so maybe you can take that to a bank and be like, there's lots of potential. No. Don't look at the previous years when we promised these things. Look at this year. This year is the year that we have lots of potential on. Do I think that Tesla's not going to pay the loan back? No, I think if they got a loan, even if it was off an imaginary robotaxi numbers, they'd be able to pay it back. But yeah, that is definitely interesting. Let's move on to the next one.
Our next question comes from Andrew from Morgan Stanley. Andrew, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Great. Thanks so much for taking the question. I just want to start on the xAI investment that you guys announced today. You talked about there being some collaboration, between the companies. So I'm just hoping to get more information, or if you're hoping that you could shed more light on what that looks like, and maybe how the work xAI is doing can be leveraged at Tesla and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at the disclosure, which we also put in there, we do talk about this is literally a furtherance of our Master Plan 4. And even today, if you look at Tesla vehicles, we are using Grok in there. And as we look at things, whether we can do it ourselves, yes, there are a lot of things which we can do ourselves. But if there are things which xAI can help accelerate our progress, then why should we not do that? And that is the reason why we've gone ahead with such an investment, because this is part of the strategic initiative. Because as it is, if you remember, I talked about how many things which we are doing ourselves. If there are ways and means we can find efficient ways for others to help us. And XAI literally fits into that mold. So that's why we went ahead with it.
And we just had like a lot of investors ask us to do this. There was like a lot of investor Tesla shareholders said like we should invest in XAI. So that's like we're just doing what shareholders like asked us to do pretty much. But Grok will be very helpful in say maximizing the efficiency of the management of a large autonomous fleet. So I mean, if you've got an autonomous fleet that's in the future 10 million vehicles or tens of millions of vehicles, then optimizing the efficient use of that fleet, Grok will be, I think, way better than any heuristic solution or sort of manually managed solution. And if you say you're managing, say, a large team of Optimus robots to build a factory or build a refinery, and say a rare hypothetical, this is a hypothetical example, a rare earth ore refinery, which we do desperately need in America. Then you say, well, what's going to organize the Optimus robots to build that ore refinery? That would you kind of need an orchestra conductor, and so then Grok would be kind of the orchestra conductor for the Optimus robots to build the hypothetically and it might not be hypothetical in the future. I'm just saying it's not currently on our plans, but we do need a lot more ore refining capacity in the U.S. So then what's going to manage? Let's say 1,000 Optimus robots to do.
Okay, so that wasn't a bad edit on my part. For some reason, Elon's audio cut out, and then they had some other issues. So I'm just going to kind of address the fact that Elon's like, the investors asked us to do this, so we're just kind of doing what they asked. The investors ask you to do a lot of things, and you choose not to do them. You do this one because it directly benefits you. Because while I do admit and acknowledge that Tesla is a very responsive company when it comes to customer requests and, even earnings stuff or investor stuff, there's plenty of times that they say no. Plenty of times that they say no. All right. In terms of Grok in the car, for the longest time, so in my car, if I hold down the right button on the steering wheel, if I push the right button on the steering wheel, I talk directly to the car. If I hold it down, Grok comes up. So I was wanting to listen to some different music, so I held down the button for too long, and I got Grok instead of talking directly to the car. In the past, when I would ask Grok, can you do X, Y, or Z for me? The answer was no, I can't really interact with how the car functions. This time, I said, hey, can you play, and I think it was Bobby Bland and B.B. King at the Coconut Grove, Let the Good Times Roll. Fantastic version of that song. So I was trying to show that to my son, and I said that, and they're like, yeah, Grok was like, yeah, I can do that. It never played. But the AI did say it could do it, where in the past it says, hey, I can't do that. I can't interact with different functions with the car. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't pursue that too much further just because I didn't really think about it. And we were close to home, and I wanted to show the song to my son before we got home. B.B. King, Bobby Bland, Let the Good Times Roll, live at the Coconut Grove, sometime in the 70s. There's like 7 songs on that album, and they are all fantastic. Stormy weather, fantastic. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Ready. We're going to move on to the next question, which is coming from Dan Levi at Barclays. Dan, please feel free.
Great. Thank you. Elon, you talked about some of the constraints on memory. Given the very tight supply, are there any near-term constraints on procuring memory? And if there are, to what extent could you look at modifying the functionality in the vehicle, similar to what you did in 21 when we saw shortages on MCUs, and maybe how are you thinking about bridging in the next few years?
Well, the Tesla AI is very compute efficient and very memory efficient. So I think one of the metrics one should consider for any given AI model is the intelligence per gigabyte, especially when you're constrained on RAM. Having an AI that has very high intelligence density per gigabyte. So you can say like for a given number of gigabytes, how much functionality can you get out of it? I actually think Tesla is ahead of the rest of the world in intelligence density of AI by an order of magnitude or more. This is going to sound like a pretty bold statement, but I kind of know what the intelligence efficiency of the big models are, like Grok, and like the honest and a bunch of the other models. And I Tesla's AI is like, in terms of its memory efficiency, I think more than an order of magnitude better. So that puts us in a pretty good position actually for scaling. And we actually do think that we do have a solution for logic and memory for, let's say, the next roughly 3 years. But if you start going beyond 3 years and we look at the scaling plans and how many fabs are getting built, and especially if you factor in geopolitical uncertainty, there's always risk that maybe those chips don't arrive that people were expecting to arrive. So that's why I think we need to have more fab capacity in the U.S. Just in case chips don't stop arriving for any reason. But this is really existential for Tesla, because if Optimus is completely useless without an AI chip. It's not like, at least the cars we can put steering wheels and pedals in, or retrofit them if need be. But Optimus is just a mannequin without, it's like the Tin Man or whatever from the Wizard of Oz. But even worse, at least the Tin Man could walk. Optimus won't even be able to, or just sit there without an AI chip. So we've got a good solution for a significant scale through, for the next roughly 3 years. Beyond that, we will be supplier limited, and so we've got to figure out some game plan to not be supplier limited.
I don't have anything to say. I agree. I mean, I don't know if they're an order of magnitude or more better than everybody else, but I agree with everything else he's saying. Next question.
Great. Our next question is going to come from George at Canaccord. George, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking my question. So there's been a surge of startups, particularly from China, entering the humanoid market, and wondering what the long-term competitive advantages that keep Tesla ahead are, and how, based on what you've seen, will Optimus fundamentally differ from these competitors? Thank you.
Well, I do think that by far the biggest competition for humanoid robots will be from China. China is incredibly good at scaling manufacturing, actually quite good at AI, as you can see from the open source, or not the open source, but the sort of, I guess some of them are open actually, but basically the models that China is distributing for free are actually quite good, and they keep getting better. So China is very good at AI, very good at manufacturing, and will definitely be the toughest competition for Tesla. We to the best of our knowledge, we don't see any significant competitors outside of China, but China will definitely be tough competition. There's no two ways about it. I always think like people sort of outside of China kind of underestimate China. China's an ass kicker next level. So, I guess we're going to build. We think Optimus will be much more capable than any robot that we are aware of under development in China. So we think we'll be ahead in terms of the real world intelligence, the electromechanical dexterity, especially the hand design, which is by far the hardest thing in the robot. And in fact, I'd say there's really three hard things about humanoid robots. Building an incredible hand that has the same degrees of freedom and dexterity as a human hand is an incredibly difficult engineering challenge. Then there's the real world AI and scaling production. Those are the three hardest problems by far for humanoid robots. I think Tesla is the only company that actually has all three of those components.
All right. Again, nothing more to add, but except for a really terrible joke that about teaching the robot to love that I can't quite figure out because I've been doing this too long and my brain is turning into mush. So, moving on to the next one, which is also the last one.
And our last question is going to come from Colin at Oppenheimer. Colin, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Thanks so much. Guys, you talked a lot about the CapEx spend, but this is an incredibly ambitious technology development program that you're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about the R&D spend and how you're thinking about the synergies of the different components, particularly on the hardware side? If you think about, batteries into chips, into memory and the efficiency of the system, and what sort of advantages you think you'll end up getting out of, some of these purpose-built devices that you'll end up integrating into multiple end markets.
Well, really all we're trying to do is make sure that we can scale to very high volume with autonomous vehicles, with humanoid robots, and that we address geopolitical risk, which I think, there's so many companies out there that are asleep at the switch with regard to geopolitical risk. They just have their head in the sand and hope nothing bad will happen. I'm way more paranoid than that. I always think of Andy Grove's famous statement, "Only the paranoid survive." Why did he come up with that statement at Intel? Let's think. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that statement. So we're going to be paranoid and make sure that we can continue to build batteries and robots and AI chips no matter what happens. And companies that don't do that, a bunch of them will cease to exist.
Yeah, remember, all this comes out of necessity. It's not that we want to do it. It's just we have no choice.
Yeah, we built the most advanced lithium refinery in the world, by the way. It's not just like our lithium refinery in Corpus Christi is not just a copy of what others have done. It's an entirely new process that is fundamentally more efficient and more advanced than anything else in the world. The same is true of our cathode refinery here in Austin. And we wish others would build this. Can other people please, for the love of God, help? The name of all that is holy. Can others please build this stuff?
It's not the first time you asked.
Exactly. This is not the first time you've said something like this.
Like, why do we have to build these things? Why can others not also can someone else build these things? It's very hard to build these things. And we build them out of desperation. Not because nobody else is building lithium refineries and cathode refineries. We're pretty much the not just the largest, but also the only lithium refinery and cathode refinery in America. So we're making moves to make sure that no matter what happens, Tesla will prosper.
I don't have anything to add on that other than Andy Grove. If you don't know who he was, he's passed away, but he was a Hungarian Jew that escaped the Holocaust with his mom, and eventually came to the U.S. and eventually was the CEO of Intel. So, only the paranoid survive comment, that does probably have a little bit to do with business, but based on his history, there may have been other meanings behind that phrase. Okay, that is it for me, folks. That is the whole episode. This was a big one. This was a long episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to email me, it's Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. If you want to see what I'm doing with the different podcasts, you can go over to 918digital.com. Tomorrow or a Saturday should be releasing a new episode of Beyond the Post, which is the podcast I do with Rob Dunwood about the creator, just being a creator. And so that's kind of going to be a fun one. And then next week we will do news and the GM earnings call, because we are in earnings call season. Let's see. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, it's Bodie Grimm, BODIEGRIMM on LinkedIn. It's kind of where I like to hang out now. TikTok is interesting. Instagram's fun. YouTube, okay. I really prefer LinkedIn, and I used to not like LinkedIn at all. So big changes for me. That's what happens when you hit 50. Your preferred social network becomes LinkedIn. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.
Great. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for Q&A today. We really appreciate everyone's questions, and we look forward to talking to you next quarter. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Very cool.